Is there something deeply broken in India's aviation management system? There have been 3 air emergencies in the last 24 hours, including another crash, a heartbreaking crash involving an air ambulance in which one of the victims, a burns victim, had taken an 8 lakh rupee loan just to try and get medical treatment. Instead, he and 6 others on board died in the crash. This has been a terrible year for Indian aviation. There has been one crisis after the other, one controversy after the other, and questions raised about the role of the aviation regulator, hard questions for the Civil Aviation Ministry. And those questions now are not just coming from journalists like myself or from the common public. Those questions are now coming from those who have supported the government. For example, Ajit Pawar's nephew, with serious questions on what caused the crash of the charter plane that took his uncle Ajit Pawar's life. On this program today, we'll be talking to 3 experts to ask why heads are not rolling. What is wrong? Because something is wrong. I'm Barkha. You're with the Mojo story. Heartbreaking tragedy from Jharkhand, where the man you see on your screen, a burns victim who ran a modest hotel in the state, was seeking medical treatment. For this, he took a loan. Then his family took another loan to be able to afford the air ambulance that they were using to get to a big city to get better medical treatment. Instead, the air ambulance crashed with all 7 people, including the 2 pilots, on board. This is the second such private charter that we have seen going down like this in the last few months. Before this, of course, it was VSR Ventures that was under scrutiny after Ajit Pawar, the Deputy Chief Minister of Maharashtra, crashed in that plane. You will remember reporting on this platform, including a whistleblower's account that spoke about shocking lapses within the company, including an attempt, according to the whistleblower, to quote-unquote financially influence the DGCA. In the meantime, the questions that are coming for the regulator are coming not just from journalists on the beat, not just from members of the public, but now also from fellow politicians. Rohit Pawar, Ajit Pawar's nephew, has been doing press conference upon press conference, alleging a commercial link between VSR Ventures that chartered the plane in which his uncle Ajit Pawar died and the TDP. The TDP, of course, has its own leader, a civil aviation minister, leading to multiple questions of, according to Rohit Pawar, conflict of interest. Rohit Pawar of the NCP has gone so far as to say the civil aviation minister must resign. Politics apart, here's the bottom line. There is something wrong. Yes, of course, accidents can happen. But the year that it has been for Indian aviation, starting with the Air India 171 crash, right up until now, there are questions for everybody involved, for the manufacturers, for the corporations, for the private companies that charter and lease these planes, for the regulator, for the ministry. To try and understand what's happening, let me introduce 3 experts on the program today as we try and make sense of it all. Captain Sharat Panikkar is with us. He has, of course, been a military veteran and then flown the Dreamliner, the controversial 787 Dreamliner, for over a decade. Good to see you, sir. Also joining us is Captain Sam Thomas. He represents ALPA, one of the major airline pilot associations of India, has been a very blunt voice, but is anything changing? Is anyone listening? We'll find out in a moment from now. And also joining us is a military veteran, Group Captain Ajay Ahlawat, often a voice of calm and reason when emotions are running high. He always reminds us to keep calm, to try and ask the right questions, even when we're feeling very agitated. And agitated we are feeling. I want to start with you, Captain Thomas, if I may. Here's another charter, private charter that's under scrutiny, Red Bird. This time after VSR, look at the tragedy that we're looking at. The tragedy is that there is the burns victim, a man of modest means in Jharkhand, takes an 8 lakh rupee loan to try and afford this air ambulance, if we can switch to those pictures now, and the plane crashes. And, I mean, words fail me. Captain Thomas, your thoughts at this point.
Ma'am, good evening. Good evening to the panelists. Thank God for the panelists who are calm. I can still continue to be blunt and call a spade a spade.
Yes.
Firstly, as you put it, heartbreaking. And air ambulance. First of all, this term air ambulance is very loosely used in India. It's almost unregulated. People just remove a couple of seats, put a stretcher there, and whoever gets the lowest quote. And I don't blame the people who are using this. It's a last resort. Sometimes people, like this particular case, even go up to an extent of taking loans so that their loved ones can get medical care immediately. Now, what seems to be the problem here is DGCA. I start my problems always with DGCA. I'm going to do that again today. Firstly, you need to foster aviation. One of their charters is to foster aviation. The moment there is a problem, you come down heavily with over regulation, because in India, the person making the regulation and person availing the regulations both don't know aviation. And into question is some of the flying skills of the pilots graduating out of the Indian FTOs that must be taken. It's not because the training alone is uh, requiring a lot of sort of improvement. It's that the
Hmm.
curriculum is designed in such a way that you barely do whatever you can to call yourself a commercial pilot. And this shows up in general aviation before it shows up into an airline, because airline has got their own training programs and they are much more robust. In general aviation, particularly in this air ambulance cases, we are seeing this one crash, but I can tell you 100 different incidents that would have led to the same problem. Unfortunately, or rather fortunately, by the grace of God, it has not happened. You
But can
must
I
have a
but can I
little.
ask you but can I ask you, you're basically saying A, that air ambulances are a vastly unregulated space. Like, it is a misnomer, this phrase air ambulance, as it is used in India. Point one. And point two, the DGCA is over regulating where it doesn't need to and under regulating where it needs to.
Absolutely, absolutely. And the problem is that you do not have subject matter experts. Now, when you just call a pilot and make him a sort of flight operations inspector, firstly, these flight operations inspectors have come in because of an audit by the FAA. And
Hmm.
now, not the best of intelligentsia end up there in DGCA as far as the pilots are concerned. Yes, there have been stellar performers who have been FOIs and SFOIs, but unfortunately, the vast majority of them leave a lot to be desired. And this is something that needs to come into a sane regulation. I mean, you cannot remove seats from a particular aircraft, put a stretcher there, and call it an air ambulance. Also, the turboprop airplanes flying in Indian condition, that is small turboprop prop airplanes in these weather, particularly in the east and northeast of India, it's a pretty big challenge. It's the ones who perform well there are the ex-military AN-32, IL-76 kind of pilots who have operated there very frequently and know it like the back of their hand. They are the ones who are performing well. But unfortunately,
Let me get the others in, but it really makes me, I don't know, for lack of a better word, angry that someone who's taking an air ambulance is already in a degree of trouble, is already going through a crisis. And then, you have this happen. Captain Panika, let me get your comments.
Start with a few things that Sam has mentioned. He's right in that most of our so called air ambulances are just normal aircraft that are modified to carry stretchers. Like even in Air India, like when we carry a patient, we remove 6 seats and we put a stretcher in that and manage to accommodate the stretcher in the space that the 6 seats on one side has vacated. It takes a lot of time to reconfigure it, and the passenger ends up paying for those 6 seats on one way and the time that it takes to configure and reconfigure to come back. So Sam is absolutely right in that most of our so-called air ambulances, I do not think we have any dedicated air ambulances which are specific and which are tailored for the job. These are usually aircraft like the one that has just crashed, which has got a certain number of seats, which is a normal configuration. And a couple of these seats are removed. A stretcher which is of course cleared for carriage by air, is fitted in, and then the patient, along with the stuff that is required to ensure that his ride is comfortable and that he can have those things hanging, those the tubes and all the other paraphernalia that is associated with an ambulance, are adjusted into the system. Okay. Coming to the second and more pertinent point that Sam has raised, Indian aviation should have aviation professionals. It cannot be led by somebody who has come recently from steel and mines and tourism before that, and something else and something else and something else and something else. My personal opinion. You need to have a specialist who's been involved in aviation.
I mean, there are any number of pilots on secondment to the DGCA. They're meant to be there to be subject matter experts. So what are they doing then?
Here, I'm talking about leadership. Okay, we're not talking at the FOI level. I was an FOI myself for 2 years. I'm aware of what happens at that stage. I was an FOI in the DGCA. I'm talking about leading civil aviation. You got to have somebody who's connected at least with aviation. You cannot have even what ICAO manifests or what ICAO mandates is that if I am signing somebody off, I got to have equal or greater qualifications than the person I'm signing off. Here in this case, you have pilot licenses, for example, being signed off by an ATC officer. Never happens anywhere. You have an AME license that is signed off by an engineer. You have, let's say, an ATC license that's signed off by an ATC officer. But a pilot license, the most specialized of all, we're talking about civil aviation, is by a non-pilot. Why? You got to have people that are involved in aviation. And in that, I'm completely in agreement with Sam, that you got to have people that are associated with aviation, are involved with aviation, and not just put in charge.
So one problem, yeah, let me bring in Group Captain Ajay Alawat. One problem that we've identified is that there aren't enough experts in positions of leadership. Is that I keep thinking of this man, Sanjay Kumar. Of course, everybody who's died in the crash, our thoughts are with them, our prayers are with the families. But I think of this man short-circuiting in his hotel. He gets burns. He's a poor man. He takes a loan. He takes his air ambulance. It goes down. I mean, it's double jeopardy, for lack of a better phrase. Think of this poor couple. But also think of pilots who are either risking their lives, flying machines in conditions that they shouldn't be flying. This is something that came up in the Ajit Pawar crash. Why did the plane approach the landing? Why didn't it turn back? Was there VIP pressure? But there are any number of questions about the charter itself, some which I've reported, some which Ajit Pawar's nephew is now raising. What do you see as the problem, Ajay, Group Captain Ajay?
Ma'am, good evening, and good evening to the fellow panelists as well. At the very outset, let me start by paying my heartfelt condolences to the crew and the passengers. Very sad year for aviation. You led with the previous accident at Baramati. That was close. Shambhavi went to the school wearing blue A4 school uniforms along with my children. So that one was close. Coming specifically to your question, what ails Indian aviation, if I may frame it like that, there are three elements. The distinguished speaker before me have alluded to some of them. Broadly speaking, you fix aviation in any country by taking care of, at the individual crew level, you take care of their training. Little larger, you take care of organization culture in the companies that they fly for, and the oversight is provided by the regulator. So the two panelists have spoken enough about DGCA. Let me comment a little bit on what's wrong with the organization culture, specifically to NSOPs. So, as
just explain NSOPs to our audience. We're talking about private charters loosely. You could explain what NSOPs are.
Okay, so there are two kind of operators. Scheduled operators are the airlines which publish their schedule. You exactly know what time a flight is supposed to depart. It may not leave at that time, but they're supposed to, the slots are given and schedules are given as such. There is visibility on what they do. and non-scheduled operators are the ones that fly charters. They fly the rich guy. They fly missions like air ambulance when somebody had to take a loan because they want their kith and kin to survive. So they are the non-scheduled operator. Essentially, very simply, schedules are not required to be printed in advance. You can book it based on the quote available. So I see a problem in the NSOP organizational culture because the way it works is, and it has come out in VSR aviation accident as well. They get away with murder sometimes, and it allows them or enables them or emboldens them to commit another murder. So among the three things that we need to fix, which is training at the crew level, there are a lot of points there as well. Organization culture at the company level and the regulator level. Since the regulatory issue has been touched, on the training side, there is a exercise set called upset prevention and recovery. It is mandatory. It has been mandatory for some time. People were not doing it. DGCA came out with a circular a couple of months ago, and suddenly there was haha that how can we do it? And that training is required to train crew for recovery from a possible situation that could have happened in this case. The Air Force goes a little bit further. They train besides the upset recovery, which we in Air Force call unusual attitude and recovery. They also train the crew for spatial disorientation. So this would be one aspect that I would recommend DGCA to look at. And secondly, we don't train our crew in taking go, no-go decisions. There has to be a structural training for deciding on go, no-go, on ground, in air, mid-flight. Air ambulance comes with a pressure of its own. There's a guy who could die if not taken to hospital. I get that pressure, but that is what professions are there for, make correct call even under pressure. So we were supposed to make good calls with bullets flying around. Not to that extent, but still professionals are required to stay calm and, make a good call. These are my opening comments.
So I want to, thanks, sir. I want to zoom out and look at the larger issues, some of which we're already picking up. Now, before this god-awful crash of this air ambulance in Jharkhand, was the crash that took Ajit Pawar and everybody else on board, took their lives. The plane was leased by a company called VSR Ventures. It should also be noted that the final report involving a mishap with this very company from 2 years ago has still not been submitted. So, this is how casual we can get sometimes. And we've been doing a lot of reporting on this company, including a Whistleblower's account, which some of you have seen. We'll play it again. Now, Rohit Pawar, Ajit Pawar's nephew, he is saying that there is a commercial link. And please remember, Ajit Pawar is a supporter or was a supporter of the government. This is not opposition versus BJP. This is the same side. We're talking about the same political side. So Rohit Pawar has alleged a commercial link between VSR Ventures and the Aviation Ministry and the DGCA. He's saying it's all interconnected. In fact, his exact phrase is that powerful people in DGCA and politics are behind VSR. I'm going to play out his statement and then come right back. Take a look.
वो भी VSR कंपनी में इन्वॉल्व है। कॉन्स्पिरेसी के बारे में अगर हम बात करें तो दो टाइप की कॉन्स्पिरेसी हो सकती है, एक तो पॉलिटिकल और कमर्शियल। अभी इसमें से कौन सी है वो हम ढूंढना चाहते हैं। इसमें दूसरी बात ऐसे है कि जो कंपनी रिस्पॉन्सिबल है, जैसे VSR रिस्पॉन्सिबल है, उसको अगर कोई सपोर्ट कर रहा है, उसको अगर कोई बचा रहा है, वो भी एक कॉन्स्पिरेसी हो सकती है। इसलिए इतने पावरफुल लोग इस कंपनी के पीछे है, DGCA के बहुत बड़े अधिकारी इसके पीछे है। तो मुझे लगता है अगर अजीत दादा को हमको न्याय देना है तो महाराष्ट्र के लोग, इस देश के लोग वहां पे प्रयत्न कर रहे हैं, वहां पे उनकी आवाज वो वहां पे बोल रहे हैं। लेकिन अगर इस इन्वेस्टिगेशन को न्याय देने की जरूरत है तो इंडिया के सबसे पावरफुल लोग, जैसे कि इस देश के प्रधानमंत्री साहब नरेंद्र मोदी जी और अमित शाह जी ही अजीत दादा को न्याय दे सकते हैं.
So, this is very significant. Rohit Pawar has been doing press conference about press conference. He has documents. He's saying that there's a conflict of interest. There's a link between Chandrababu Naidu and this company. But either way, the bottom line is, what is his mota allegation? The mota allegation is VSR is powerful and therefore gets away. We just heard Group Captain Alawat saying in another context that some of these NSOPs get away with murder. We had a whistleblower talk to us with his identity hidden, but otherwise in writing, on record. This was his testimony. Some of you have seen it. He told me that there are credible allegations that inspections by the regulator are influenced through payments to certain DGCA personnel, and this was only one of the very damning allegations made by him. He also said the organization, talking about VSR, uses financial influence rather than corrective actions. Went on to talk about how flying hours and rest time regulations are not followed. The most serious thing he said, apart from the financial sort of irregularity charge, was that CVRs are routinely kept off. I'm bringing this up because when I said it, people said, are you sure? Now, Ajit Pawar's own nephew is raising questions about how this company and other companies like it may be functioning. So I just want reactions. Group Captain just said some of these NSOPs get away with murder. What's going on here, Captain Thomas? What is going on here? And why should a pilot risk his or her life to operate in such conditions? Of course, the training of the pilot itself, as you flagged, could be a problem. But assuming that the pilot is a well-trained person, what's going on here? Yeah.
Ma'am, a couple of things. Firstly, I'd like to state on record that I am an NSOP owner and I am currently attending an air accident investigation course which says that every crash has a political angle. Now,
What do you
Group Captain
mean?
Alawat,
What do you mean every crash has a political angle? What does that mean?
every crash, irrespective of the nationality, has a political angle to it, because if there is, say for instance, a simple thing like if the crash happens in a particular constituency where the politician wants to raise his concern regarding that particular crash, he would do it at the first opportunity. Now, why is this thing becoming such an issue? Because you have an AAIB that never comes out with the results. Therefore, it is natural that person who is concerned about his uncle or his relative is going to go down the path of suspicion. Now, we've been raising this ever so many times from the Air India crash and much before that unless you have a transparent body and a qualified body that can look into air accident investigations, all conspiracy theories are always going to come up, and it comes up irrespective of nationality. Now, the other part is timely. If you inordinately delay these results, there is always going to be a suspicion. Now, I know a particular captain who has been grounded for about 4.5 months or 5 months now, and he doesn't know who has grounded him. DGCA tells him that AIB has grounded him. AIB says that DGCA has grounded him. Now, that is the reason why we want to say that get qualified professionals in both places and transparency. Why are you hiding? What are you hiding? Do you even know what you're hiding? So, our call was to involve us, or who are qualified professionals. We are not just any other pilot. I mean, we are qualified. We have certificates to show that. Now, if you involve us, and why are you hiding it from the press today? Because the media is calling on these people to figure out what is happening at a timely basis. That is the reason they are even bothering to respond. Otherwise, they would not have. What happened to the 2023 VSR crash? Does anybody even know about it? Yes, this particular airplane needs a little bit more skill. Every airplane requires skill, but there are certain aircraft that are a little quicker than the other, wild stallion kind of situation where you need your attention a little bit more, and you just cannot cut corners while flying these kind of aircraft. I would equate it to flying a MiG-21 in the Air Force, and the Learjet is pretty much similar in not exactly equating, but then that's the kind of skill you need.
Let me bring in Wing Commander Panikkar on that. That it's a little bit like flying an Air Force fighter jet. It needs sometimes that kind of agility. I think that's the point Sam is trying to make. Honestly, like as somebody, not a pilot, have been passenger in all manners of aircraft, from I don't know, small helicopters to planes that have landed on aircraft carriers. I think that some of these small charters, they feel absolutely dangerous to me. And I'm making an irrational statement here, but they don't feel safe. And I say this as someone who's a pretty daredevil personality. I think my question to you is, what is happening? Why are people looking at aviation today and feeling this anxiety?
Okay, I'd like to take a few minutes here because we're going in different directions at the same time.
Yeah.
While I was in DGCA in Mumbai, I was looking after 8 NSOPs, 8 of them,
Yeah.
which included, they were all fixed wing, and they were from different companies at various levels of capability and various fleet strengths. Once I started getting into it, I tend to be a bit of a stickler for stuff. When I was going through the ops manuals, which basically tells you how to operate these aircraft, I found helicopter references in an ops manual of a fixed wing NSOP. Absolutely shocking. And
Yeah.
it had cleared your DGCA audits and inspections for years and years.
Yeah.
So a lot of their stuff, you must understand this ecosystem that's happening. Now, Sam is a knowledgeable man. He's experienced in owning an NSOP himself, as he just mentioned. It was my first exposure to NSOPs. When you look at the ecosystem of non-scheduled operators, a lot of them are businessmen who look at small aircraft with the intention from a business point of view. Sometimes when the NSOPs or their charter business or the NSOP business itself is not making enough money or is not suiting their convenience or their business plans, they just shut it down and get into something else. As a result, the focus upon running the NSOP in the manner it is to be, which is laid down by the regulator, is not followed in letter and spirit. So you have maybe you got multiple aircraft, you've got the paperwork, which is generally shoddy and is generally outsourced to somebody, and it comes back, and nobody is truly sure as to what is the extent of involvement of the owners, of the accountable managers, etc., etc., etc. Now, when you look at the operations of the NSOP itself, there is a certain degree of compartmentalization that takes place. Now, the people that they get to fly these aircraft are also obviously people that are generally marking their time, waiting for an opportunity to get into a scheduled operator or to join a regular airline. As such, it is only a very, very few, I would say, specialists. And I would say, in my experience, the 2 years that I was in DGCA, specialists from the Air Force that have joined the NSOPs directly and are doing well. Otherwise, in general, the vast majority of the people that I have met during my interaction with the NSOPs that I was looking after are generally people that were just marking time, building up hours of experience, waiting for an opportunity to switch over to something more regular. Now, coming to the problems that they have. Now, this is important. The FOI himself is viewed in DGCA as, somebody just temporary. You come, we listen to you, but the final signature, the final letterhead is always signed by a permanent employee. You may get an opinion from here, but the authority and everything else is controlled only by the people that are already embedded in the system. Now, when these representatives of the NSOPs, when they interact with me on a regular basis, they have mentioned a lot of problems that they face in DGCA. And primarily, I would say, this is not so much with the FOI part of it. It is primarily with the airworthiness part of it and the licensing part of it. So these are two areas in which the NSOPs themselves have had multiple problems in trying to get clearances. Invariably, they are waiting for something. And if you are not satisfying them to the extent possible, the file keeps moving up and down. And to keep an aircraft on the ground is expensive. So they end up into a vicious cycle in which the operator wants to get something. There is somebody in the DGCA who is not obliging, and the file keeps rotating up and down till the conditions are met.
As I said at the beginning, the problem seems to be both over-regulation and under-regulation, not applied where one needs to be. Group Captain, if I may bring you in at this point, what needs to change? Let's start there. I'll start with you and then ask both our other guests. One thing that needs to change, subject matter experts, over-regulated spaces, under-regulated spaces, no transparency or time-bound findings of mishaps. These are some of the things that have come up. What else would you add to this?
Ma'am, Captain Sam owns an NSOP and Captain Pankar has exercised oversight functions for 2 years. I would like to add here, I was also a DGCA approved Chief of Flight Safety in a Delhi-based NSOP for 2 years. And I have a little bit of experience in scheduled aviation as well. And what I saw as the Chief of Safety is in NSOP, as any military man, I thought every problem is solvable, but no, it is not. Okay, now if you have defined the problem statement that NSOPs don't follow the rules and the regs, if you assume that is the problem statement, and if you throw this problem statement at DGCA, they'll come out with 10 more regulations. And that is the problem. My suggestion, even when I handed over or refused to continue, there were twofold. One is we should under-regulate and make regulation sensible. It may sound counterintuitive that you break so many rules, but the suggestion is to reduce those number of rules and make them common sense or sensible. That was one. And secondly, DGCA rules by fear. It's like fear-based regulation. Some of these NSOPs are small. They generally want to do well, but they cannot really spend so much on staffing and etc. So instead of fear-based regulation, if you get into some kind of mentorship-based regulation for specifically smaller NSOPs, these two suggestions, in my opinion, would have made the difference.
Okay, very quick closing comments. If Captain Thomas, Captain Panikar, you want to add to that? We polled our audience. Where does the problem lie? There's a great deal of, I think, questioning around the DGCA. I think a year and a half ago, the common public may not have known much about the DGCA, but it's been a year of crashes and crises and mishaps, terrible year. And 50% of our audience feels that the DGCA needs a total overhaul. So that's just one of our findings. Very quickly, I think to add to Ajay's point, over-regulation is not the answer. Under-regulation is, and make the rules sensible, because otherwise you're creating a pact of fear between especially a small company and the regulator. That leads to, he didn't say this, I'm saying it, that leads to people, I don't know, that probably leads to corruption or possible corruption. I'm a small player. How do I get my file to move? And so on. So very quick thoughts, Captain Panikar. I'll start with you and then give the closing word to Captain Thomas. Quickly, please. Captain Panikar.
Okay. First and foremost, civil aviation in this country should be headed by people that understand civil aviation and are preferably professionals in the field. I see no sense in having just an IAS officer who keeps heading the civil aviation or the who comes in as a Director General Civil Aviation. In my opinion, it should be somebody who is a professional and not a generalist. You cannot head a company like TCS by putting an IAS officer out there. You need somebody who's got domain knowledge. You got to have somebody who's able to take decisions based upon aviation knowledge, not some course that he's done 2 years back or the experience that he has in a passenger cabin having flown all across the world. It has to be people that are related to aviation and more specifically, as ICAO also says, people that are specialized in the job, people that have domain knowledge. Next, I agree with you. Like, for example, even the Aircraft Accident Investigation Board, anything to do with civil aviation, if you do not have a pilot in charge, like typically a code of inquiry in the Air Force, in the case of a crash, is headed by a flyer, is headed by a pilot. And all the rest of the people are added on as the requirement is there. Here it is a total technical field. You do not know a flying incident has resulted in an accident, right?
Yeah.
But you don't have a pilot there. You don't have a pilot posted there.
Yeah.
It's incredible.
I completely agree.
needs
But Captain Thomas, do you want to just take the closing word? And you didn't comment specifically on Rohit Pawar's allegations. I don't mean to make this about one company, one entity, but the fact is, this sort of perception today that, I don't know, money, influence, politics, power actually moves files, moves the world of aviation, and that's why corners are cut. This is a perception developing in the public, and it's a terrible perception because the flying public is, we have to keep reminding people that aviation is way safer than traveling by road, but the power structures in road travel are not the same. You don't need a license and approval, a regulation to take your car out and drive. You need some very basic laws. So that's the difference. And therefore, this perception is building up that yahan dal mein kuch kala hai among regular people.
Absolutely right, ma'am. Ma'am, dal mein kuch kala is a very benevolent statement that you have made. Pura dal hi kala hai, thoda peela bhi hai kahin pe. And I completely agree with Wing Commander Panikkar and Group Captain Ahlawat on the requirements that are done for the day. In addition, the CAP 3200, that is the regulations that I need to follow as an NSOP owner, are akin to the sedition law of India. Whatever I do, I can never comply with that. So therefore comes this less than merit kind of scenario where other than normal operations, I'll have to do something. Otherwise, a simple officer can make sure that my aircraft lies on ground forever. That is the way it is. And secondly, as far as the AIB is concerned, just think about it. If a court of inquiry in the Air Force has to be conducted by a bandmaster, warrant officer so-and-so, very good music composer, if he conducts and he leads that court of inquiry, what are you going to get at the end of the day? That is exactly what is happening with AIB. So I rest my case on this. I hope whatever the suggestions that both Group Captain Ahlawat and Wing Commander Panikkar have given are taken. At least 10% of the implementation of that would see us in a much better space.
Well, I think the bottom line is we have to stop with the denials. There is something broken in the aviation management regulation system. That's where the conversation has to start. Accidents in the air are black swan moments. What we've seen, the kind of hellish year we've had in the last many months is now beyond black swan moments. We've had 3 air emergencies, 1 fatal in the last 24 hours, an air ambulance going down, taking down not just the pilot and crew, but a man from Jharkhand who took a loan of 8 lakh rupees in the hope that a hospital could cure and treat his burns. Instead, he was confronted with death. That is a story that should impact us all, because each one of us who flies should be invested in this conversation. We leave it there. Thank you so much, Captain Thomas, Captain Panikkar, and Group Captain Ahlawat. Thank you so much, and to our audience, thank you. See you tomorrow.
It's great to see you here. Thank you for watching our work. If you haven't subscribed yet, don't forget to click the bell icon and subscribe to Mojo Story and support independent, robust journalism.